So, you've got your world and some characters, but where are they going? That's where locations come in. Before we get into talking about locations in your world building, I'm once again going to thank you all for the massive support on the last video. There are over 80 of you subscribed right now, and I'd like to give each and every one of you a big thanks. Onward we go. So, locations. They exist in an interesting middle ground when it comes to your world building project, whatever it may be. They'll exist in the context of your larger scale factions, as discussed in the last video, and may house smaller scale factions. However, in this video, we're going to really be zeroing in on the idea that settings are just like characters. The more in-depth and unique they are, the more effective they will be. Locations are also very broad. Everything from a single building to an entire city counts as a location, and each will have their own unique characteristics. So real quick, I want you to follow along with me in a little exercise. Take a look around the room, or if you're outdoors, the scenery surrounding you. If you had to write, say, 2 or 3 sentences about this place you find yourself in, what stands out to you as being the most important? Keep whatever you think of in this exercise in mind. We'll come back to it at the end. And of course, who could better help us expand our understanding of locations than Protagonist Von Generic, just finished meeting with Honest the Trustworthy. So our brave hero is back on the streets of Placeton and decides he wants to go get a drink, a meal, and somewhere to rest. He wanders around until he stumbles across a tavern. Here's where our method for this video comes in. We don't need an acronym for this one because it's something most of you will be familiar with already. The 5 senses. Yes, really. Thinking about the 5 senses is all you need for a good location. We'll start with the one people often think of first. Step 1. Sight. When it comes to sight, there are often so many options for what to describe that the real lesson is in learning what not to include. If you take a look at the shot on your screen right now, there are a ton of things just at this one angle of the room I'm in that I could ramble on for ages about in my description. But would I? No, of course not. It'd be super boring. Instead, when you're working on describing the appearance of a location, focus on, say, 2 to 5 details. So protagonist stumbles into the shady dark tavern. It's crowded, but what does he see? Do I describe each and every floorboard? No, but I might mention the spider webs in every corner, the bartender so decrepit that he appears to have a layer of dust covering him, or the dim light from the sun that only barely makes it through the dirty windows. These all serve to give you an impression. This isn't a great place. It could be dangerous, but is definitely run down. You don't need to give all that much, just enough that it gives yourself or your audience that distinct feel that immerses them in the locale. If you're working with a larger scale faction, like the entire city itself, these sorts of descriptions can create pretty powerful effects. It's one thing if the shady dark tavern is this dreary, but if the whole city is black gothic arches and storm clouds, that certainly sets a different tone than a peaceful town on the sunny day. We don't really give Helm's Deep and the Shire the same sort of aesthetic feeling or vibes, do we? So that brings us to step 2, hearing. It's here that I'll get up on my soapbox and declare that sight is overused while hearing, taste, smell, and touch are underused. Yeah, sight is easier, but if all you're going to do is describe what something looks like, then you're going to fail relative to an art piece or a photo. Those are great as well, but what they can't do that good writing or description can do is establish what all the other senses are experiencing. When it comes to hearing, I don't necessarily mean what people are saying, as that falls more into the realm of dialogue. I more so mean the kinds of things you're hearing from the people and the environment surrounding the location. Here's what I'm talking about. So as protagonist Von Generic swung open the door to the shady dark tavern, not a single person stopped what they were doing to pay him any mind. He might hear whispered dealings in the back that he can't quite make out. There might be the buzzing of flies coming from another room, and when he pulls up one of the cracked bar stools, it might groan as he puts his weight upon it to sit down. With details like this, one might think protagonist should find another tavern. And when it comes to hearing in particular, it has a unique usefulness in its ambiguity, which the other senses don't actually really match. Is that buzzing in the other room because it's just a dirty bathroom? Is that where old food is thrown out? Or perhaps someone even died in there. You can't say for sure, and sight isn't solving the problem either unless protagonist develops X-ray vision. The sounds of larger locations like towns often fall into 3 categories, I find. Business as usual, muffled sounds of violence, and dead silence. Business as usual just means you have whatever it is that would be expected for the location. You know, people talking and walking and otherwise going about their business. Muffled sounds of violence is to say things like distant gunshots or an occasional scream. And then dead silence can be the most powerful of all and uses that ambiguity factor well. If protagonist is walking down the city streets at night and there's just not a single sound, it really establishes this sort of creepy feeling. Did curfew come early, or is something really, really wrong? Step 3. Smell. Most people do use smell in their projects, but generally only around food. I dare say smell can be useful just about anywhere, as a player in one of my own tabletop RPG campaigns has proven to me. And attempting to use smell rather than sight for perception with such frequency, I realize just how much utility exists within this sense. As Von Generic waits for the barkeep to ask for his order, he notices the sort of musty smell in the tavern, which he finds adds to the rustic charm of the place. He then orders this week's special, and the barkeep nods, bringing out what he calls good taste ale shortly after. It looks just like any other beer as protagonist lifts it to his face, foam sloshing over the side of the tankard, but there's something off about its smell. He brings it closer and thinks he detects an acidic, sour sort of smell. He racks his brain before remembering being very specifically told about a certain very bad not good root, which is used to brew some of the beers in this area. He decides that rules are for nerds and raises it to take a sip anyway. When we're talking about smells in cities, medieval-esque towns definitely had a reputation for not smelling so nice, but those sorts of details can be counterbalanced by the sweet smells of a nearby bakery, or something along those lines. But perhaps you turn the wrong corner or go down the wrong alley, then you become aware of something more distressing. Something off in the air could be the first sign of imminent danger. And now we're at step 4, taste. While taste is certainly the most limited sense in that it's basically only going to apply to food, it still has its place and, where relevant, can be a crucial detail because it's just a completely different sense than all the others. It adds flavor not only to food, but also to your locations. So, Von Generic takes a swig and is surprised to find that this beer is just about the best thing he's ever had. It tastes sweet, but not overly so, with a sort of earthy undertone that makes the drink feel organic, but not dirty. The aftertaste is a little strange, coming up tart, but he decides the best way to solve that is with another round. And then another, and another. Taste, unless you want your characters to be licking the sidewalks, which I'd recommend against, is not likely to be particularly relevant on the large scale. The most I might be able to say is that certain districts or even entire towns may be known for their food. In the tangle of working out character dynamics, politics, and warfare, we world builders might forget that quite often your average person might know a place like France or Italy in our real world far more for their food than for their histories. And finally, that takes us to step 5, touch. Touch is almost as extensive as sight, though I find it's the most neglected sense relative to its potential. We live in a world of textures that we often never really think about. Right in front of me I have the soft foam of the microphone, the smooth metal of the stand, or the slick plastic of my keyboard. These are all visceral details that put yourself or your audience in place just as much, if not more, than many of the other senses can. Von Generic, now having downed about 7 of this week's special, is getting a little loopy. He runs his hand up and down the old wooden tankard, feeling where the once polished wood is pitted and worn with use. The bar table itself is new, so much so that it hasn't even been sanded down yet. He runs his hand across it but grimaces as he gets a splinter, now feeling a pulsing pain in his thumb. He drops a smooth gold coin on the table and stumbles out the door before falling onto all fours, his hands hitting the cold, wet cobblestone street. Pretty much everything in that paragraph I just said to you is touch. The possibilities are literally endless. On a larger scale, this often applies to overall feelings like the temperature, the smoothness or roughness of the roads, or other such details which may or may not be worth mentioning at your own discretion. It's now with this in mind that you can return to the example of your current surroundings. Consider your five senses and then think about or write about how you describe them with the five senses. It's good practice, and once you've done it, all you have to do is apply those principles to your own world building. I think that about wraps it up for this one. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and consider subscribing. All the support you guys have been showing in the recent couple videos has really meant the world to me. And I don't know, this has been really unique so far. I'm having a great time, and I hope you guys are too. So thanks for taking a chance on a small channel, and remember, trust your senses.